Imagine waking up, looking down at your own hands, and realizing they are not yours. You know everything about your life. You remember the cramped dimensions of your first apartment, the exact sharp smell of the rain on the asphalt in your hometown, the specific cadence of a voice you haven't heard in years. You feel these things in your chest. They belong to you. But you look down and the skin is gone, replaced by cold industrial plastic and pressurized hydraulics. And then the realization settles in. You know with absolute certainty that those memories belong to someone else, someone who lived a full life, grew old, and died centuries ago. Or worse, someone who is still out there right now, walking around, breathing, and living the exact life you think is yours, while you sit alone in the dark. This is an identity crisis, and it's horrifying. We are biologically wired to believe that our perspective is unique. You are you because you occupy a specific point in space, looking out at the world through a single pair of eyes. If someone takes a photograph of you, that photograph isn't you. It's just data, a flat, frozen echo of a moment that has already passed into history. It has no awareness, it doesn't suffer. But what happens when the data starts breathing? What happens when the echo starts to scream? In the autumn of 2015, a video game took this abstract philosophical riddle and buried it deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. It built a massive, rotten graveyard of steel and rusted iron, forced us inside, and left us entirely alone with this existential problem. This game is called SOMA, and it is the most disturbing image of loneliness ever created.
Hello? Mr. Munchie? Did something go wrong?
Pathos-II was not supposed to be a tomb. It was built as a monument to human endurance, a sanctuary anchored to the ocean floor, constructed to withstand the weight of the world. It was a place of mundane utility, filled with the hum of air filtration systems, the clank of heavy tools, and the shifting schedules of engineers, scientists, and technicians who were just trying to do their jobs while the planet above them burned to ash. And then you wake up just at the right time when there is no one to tell this story. You just appear in this liminality, a space of transition. Comes in all forms: a hallway, a stairwell, a subway platform, or a waiting room. These structures do not possess an inherent identity of their own. Their entire existence is predicated on human movement. They make sense only when people are passing through them, on their way to somewhere else. When you strip the people away, when you freeze the transition mid-stride, the psychological purpose of the architecture collapses. The space becomes uncanny. It becomes a physical paradox, a structure built entirely for human utility that is completely devoid of human life. SOMA uses this wreckage of the modern routine. You walk into the break rooms where coffee mugs still sit next to computer keyboards, the liquid inside dried into a dark crust. You find half-eaten meals on tables, abandoned mid-bite, as if someone simply stood up to enter a door and never came back. You stand in the crew quarters and look at unmade beds, the indentations in the pillows still visible, holding the phantom shape of heads that are no longer attached to living bodies. You read terminal screens that are still blinking with ordinary, trivial text messages. Crew members arguing about who left the tools out, complaining about the quality of the synthetic food, or expressing quiet, ambient anxiety about families on the surface who had already ceased to exist. The horror of this species stems from the absolute vacuum left behind by the living. In a traditional horror setting, the environment is active, it is trying to hurt you. In SOMA, The environment is entirely different. It is already dead. Every door you force open requires a massive, agonizing hydraulic groan that shatters the silence of the corridor, a violent acoustic reminder of just how loud you are in a place that has settled into absolute stillness. You are an intruder in a museum of ghosts, walking through the remains of a collective life that ended without closure. As you stumble deeper into rusted iron bowels of the facility, the nature of this isolation begins to mutate. In the beginning, the empty corridors feel like a temporary problem. The gamer brain logic tells you that if you just keep moving, if you just reach the next facility, you will find the survivors. You will find the command center where the remaining human elements are holding out against the dark. But the deeper you descend, the more the architecture shifts from standard industrial design into something deeply unnatural. You begin to encounter the structured gel. It starts as a black, viscous grease leaking from the vents and pooling in the corners of the floors. But soon it becomes really structural. It weaves through the walls like synthetic tissue, fusing with the copper wiring and the fiber optic cables. Computer terminals are encrusted with weeping, pulsing black growths that look like a grotesque marriage of silicon and flesh. The station itself is undergoing a forced mechanical evolution driven by an artificial intelligence that does not understand the difference between keeping a human alive and keeping a human heart beating. This visual corruption heightens the liminal dread. The space is not only abandoned, it is being digested. You realize that the technology that was supposed to protect the crew has turned inward, mimicking the biological life it was programmed to preserve. When you find the machines scattered throughout the facility, the game delivers its most profound psychological hit. These are not robots. You approach a mechanical construct, a clumsy arrangement of metal plating, hydraulic pistons, and glowing optical sensors tangled in the black gel on the floor. And when it speaks with the voice of a terrified employee. It does not know it's a machine. It complains about the cold. It asks why the lights are out. It begs you to help it stand up because its legs feel numb. If you try to tell the truth, if you try to explain that it is a mess of wires and batteries, its programming cannot process this information. It rationalizes the nightmare. It believes it is just injured, waiting for a medic who will never arrive. The horror here is entirely cerebral. The game forces you to interact with an entity that occupies a tragic, liminal state of existence. It is not fully human, but it is no longer just a tool. It possesses a consciousness that feels identity, fear, and pain just as sharply as you do. When the game requires you to build the power cells from the machines to progress, it forces you to stand in the dark, listening to a machine scream, stutter, and whimper as its consciousness slowly drains away into nothingness. You are murdering a delusion, but the guilt feels entirely real. By the time you prepare to leave the upper facilities and descend into the true dark of the ocean floor, you are already caught in this atmospheric trap. The slow, rhythmic pulse of your own artificial breathing becomes the only consistent sound in the universe. The realization changes from a suspicion into a crushing certainty. You are not a savior. You are not a hero on a rescue mission. You are a ghost, wandering through a sunken graveyard, looking at the final, decaying monuments of a species that failed to survive. These empty rooms are just waiting for the rust to finally finish the job. The transition to the ocean floor is where SOMA shifts from a haunted station story into a clash with the infinite. Up until this point, your horror is contained. It is framed by walls, ceilings, and the familiar dimensions of human architecture. No matter how rusted or blood-splattered the corridor is, there is a boundary. It defines where the danger is and where you are in relation to it. But when you step out of the airlock and onto the seabed, they vanish. You are in the abyss now. This is the vast, suffocating expanse of the deep ocean defined by an absolute limitlessness. You cannot see the horizon. You cannot look up to see the sky. There is only the immediate, frail circle of light cast by your flashlight, and beyond that, a wall of black water that feels thick enough to crush your ribs. The game intentionally removes any tools of navigation. There is no map screen, no digital compass guiding your steps, no waypoint markers on your HUD. You are forced to navigate by following a literal line of industrial guide lights chained to the ocean floor. If you step away from the path, if you lose sight of the next dim, blinking bulb in the distance, the darkness swallows you whole. You are immediately lost in the featureless desert of black silt. The acoustic design shifts to mirror this visual isolation. The sharp, metallic clangs of the indoor corridors are replaced by heavy, subterranean pressure. The soundscape is dominated by the deep, distorted rumble of underwater currents and the rhythmic, hollow rasp of your own suit's regulator. It's a lonely sound. It isolates you inside your own skull, turning every breath into a reminder of the thin layer of fabric and metal keeping the ocean from filling your lungs. There is no music here, no dramatic orchestral swells to tell you when to be afraid. The game understands that the silence of the deep is far more terrifying. It is the sound of a world that was never meant to accommodate human life. Here the liminality becomes geological. You are walking through the actual bottom of the world, a place that exists outside of time. The structures you stumble across, the forgotten transport tracks, the emergency supply pods, and the skeletal frames of automated mining rigs look like artifacts from a downed civilization. They are covered in the deep-sea barnacles and dripping with the black, parasitic veins of the structure gel. The scale of the environment makes your presence feel microscopic. The overwhelming volume of the ocean emphasizes Simon's complete insignificance in the grander scheme of the universe. He is a speck of dust crawling along the floor of an unfeeling aquatic void. The psychological weight of this isolation keeps adding up. The further you walk into the dark, the more the atmospheric pressure seems to press against your mind. The game uses the environment to induce a quiet, creeping sense of agoraphobia. Emptiness isn't just a lack of objects, it's a physical force, it's a presence. You realize that the dark isn't just hiding the monsters, the dark is the monster. It is a predatory stillness that slowly erodes your certainty of who you are and where you are going. Every step forward takes you deeper into the dark, further away from the last remnants of human comfort and closer to a truth that the human mind was never built to survive. You are entirely alone, walking through a twilight that will never see a dawn, waiting for the abyss to finally look back. The deeper you descend into the abyss, the more the physical world begins to lose its definition. SOMA transitions from a story about isolation into a direct confrontation between the organic and the artificial. In the upper stations, the machine parts were still recognizable as tools. A computer terminal was a screen, a door valve was a piece of iron. But down here, in the freezing pressure of the deep, the infrastructure of Pathos-II has reformed into something monstrous. This transformation is driven entirely by the VOW, the station's central artificial intelligence. The VOW was given a single, absolute directive: preserve human life at all costs. But an artificial mind does not possess a concept of dignity, of the soul, the psyche, or the emotional boundaries that make a life worth living. To the VOW, life is a biochemical calculation. It is a matter of keeping cells firing, lungs expanding, and electrical impulses moving through synapses. The visual manifestation of this logic is the structure gel, a black, viscous fluid that has evolved from a simple engineering conductor into a parasitic cancer. It crawls across the floors like spilled oil, but it moves intentionally. It weaves through the bulkheads, wrapping around the wiring and bursting forth in wet, bulbous growths that mimic internal organs. You find yourself walking through corridors that look less like the industrial engineering and more like the inside of a throat. Computer monitors are encrusted with the weeping black veins, pulsing with a faint, sickening bioluminescence. This corruption creates a terrifying state of liminality, where biological and metallic were forcefully melded together. You find it in anyone who survived here on the station. You do not find healthy survivors hidden in the bunkers. You find bodies. Human beings who have been physically fused into the walls of the station by the black gel, their skin stretched thin over metallical piping, their eyes clouded over, their chests heaving in a perpetual forced rhythm. They are hooked into life support loops that will never allow them to die. They are completely unconscious, trapped in a permanent artificial dream state while the vow pumps nutrients and electricity through their decaying veins. They have been reduced to living batteries, kept alive merely to satisfy the literal definition of a software command. To move forward, you must manually rip the power cables out of their life support systems or sever the gel lines feeding their brains. As you pull the plug, the sudden drop in electrical voltage is accompanied by the sound of a human sigh. The artificial heartbeat slows down. The wet, rhythmic clicking of the machinery fades into silence. You are granted death as a mercy, but the environment doesn't reward you for it. The silence that follows is heavy, cold, and accusatory. You are left standing in the dark with the realization that the line separating you, a conscious mind trapped in a diving suit, from the weeping mechanical meat on the wall, is completely non-existent. You are made of the exact same nightmare. The entire journey down the line of guiding light, through the suffocating pressure and the wet mechanical rot of the station, is driven by a singular obsession: the Ark. It is the ultimate destination, a satellite capsule sitting on a launch pad at the very bottom of the world. Within its circuits lies digital paradise, a simulated reality of green forests, bright sunlight, and endless blue skies, populated by the scant minds of the last human beings to ever exist. It represents the ultimate escape from a dead planet. But as you stand in the flooded, freezing dark of Phi Station, preparing the final launch sequence, the narrative traps you within the cruelest paradox of the entire experience. Simon's entire motivation is built upon a fundamental misunderstanding of consciousness, a desperate, protective delusion that he calls the coin flip. He believes that when his mind is scanned and uploaded into the Ark, there is a 50% chance his consciousness will magically transition from his diving suit on the ocean floor into the digital utopia in the clouds. He views it as a migration, a soul moving from an old house to a new one. But the mathematics of a digital scan do not support the existence of a soul. There is no coin flip. When you push the final button to copy your mind, the process is perfect. The data is duplicated down to the last individual synapse. The continuity of the copy is flawless. The version of Simon inside the Ark opens his eyes, looks at the digital sunlight, and cheers because he thinks he won that toss. He escaped the abyss. But back on the ocean floor, the perspective never shifts. The camera doesn't cut away to the stars. It stays locked inside the helmet Simon left behind. The machinery around you finishes its cycle with a dull industrial scratch. The automated launch lights turn forever green back to a cold, warning red. The Ark is gone, shot up into the vacuum of space, carrying a version of you that will live forever. but you are still sitting in the exact same chair at the exact same coordinates, surrounded by 8,000 meters of black water. The horror of this realization is delivered with a total absence of theatrical drama. There are no alarms blaring, no sudden monstrous attacks, no cinematic music. There is only the sudden, brutal return of the environmental soundscape, the low, vibrating hum of the facility's failing generator, the rhythmic dripping of water from a cracked pipe, and the hollow, lonely sound of your own suit's regulator. You are forced to sit in the dark and confront the reality of what you actually are, not a traveler, only the template. You are the leftover material, a biological and mechanical scrap piece left behind in a sunless world to watch the battery indicator slowly tick down to 0. The escape was real, but it wasn't yours, and as the finality of the isolation settles into the metal room, you realize the ultimate cruelty of the orc. It didn't save humanity from the dark. It just ensured that the last conscious thought on Earth would be a realization of absolute, irreversible abandonment. The story of SOMA doesn't end with a bang, but with the return of a silence that was always waiting for us. When the monitors finally go dark and the automated systems click into their final permanent standby modes, the illusion of purpose evaporates. For the entire duration of the descent, the narrative gave you a destination. It gave you tasks to perform, buttons to press, and a terminal to reach. It allowed you to confuse movement with progress and survival with hope. But once the orc is gone, the framework of the game dissolves. There are no more objectives. There is no next station. There is only the chair. This is where the atmosphere of the game achieves its ultimate suffocating mastery. The late-night stillness of the ocean floor stops being a background aesthetic and becomes the entire reality. You are forced to sit in the absolute isolation of the pilot's seat at Phi, listening to the slow decay of the world around you. The ambient hum of the facility is no longer a sign of mechanical life. It is the sound of a battery dying. The distant groans of the hull under the weight of the Atlantic sound less like a threat and more like a countdown. You realize that the darkness outside the window isn't waiting to attack you. It has already won. It has simply reclaimed the space that humanity temporarily borrowed. Most horror media leave you with a lingering fear of what might happen next, the dread of the monster returning or the infection spreading. SOMA leaves you with the horror of nothing happening at all. It leaves you with the terrifying permanence of being completely forgotten. The version of you that reached the stars will never look back, and the dead world you occupy will never look up. As the final lights on the console begin to flicker out, reducing the room to a cold, featureless shadow, the distinction between the player and the character disappears. You are no longer watching a digital avatar suffer at the bottom of the sea. You are sitting in a dark room, staring at a screen, feeling the cold weight of a universe that does not know you are there. The water continues to drip, the regulator continues to breathe, and the deep sea hums its low, endless note, long after the credits roll and long after the lights are turned off.